You know, when he started telling people that he was hearing voices, that he had this inexplicable calling placed upon his life that he had to fulfill, well, those people thought he was crazy. And maybe he was, to uproot your life, to risk losing everything because you have a few strange dreams, because you have whimsical visions, because puzzling words intrude upon your mind. These are not good reasons to go flit all over the countryside, to put your family's well-being in jeopardy, or to set off on some grand divine mission that you don't understand. Of course, I'm talking about Abraham. Leave your native country and go to the land that I will show you, he heard God say in the ether. So like a madman, off he goes. Look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you will have. That same voice said to Abraham a few years later, years that Abraham really didn't have to give. You see, Abraham had an AARP magazine on his desk and a Medicare card in his wallet. And he had no children, no heirs. But God keeps speaking and making Abraham do crazy things. The New Testament says Abraham went without knowing where he was going, like a fool, we might say. And when he reached the land God promised him, he lived there by faith. Faith can look a whole lot like foolishness when the only evidence that you have is a voice inside your head. Of course, I'm speaking of Abraham, and I'm speaking of Ray Kinsella too. Ray Kinsella, portrayed by Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams, heeds this inexplicable calling himself, a voice, a vision, a dream. And he does the unthinkable in Dyersville, Iowa. Everyone thought he was crazy, plowing up a cornfield. If you build it, he will come, said the voice. And Ray's wife asked him, if you build what, who will come? And Ray answered, he didn't say. A little later, with that voice dogging his thoughts and visiting his dreams, Ray says to his wife, I think I know what if you build it means. I think it means that I need to build a baseball field. And he does. A magic diamond where long-lost players from generations past can return to the game they loved and play again. And in another scene, Ray confides in his wife Annie and says, the voice is back. And Annie says, oh Lord, you don't have to build a football field now, do you? And Ray says, he wouldn't tell me. And Annie says, Ray, this is a very non-specific voice that you have out there, and it's really starting to make me mad. And so it was. And so it goes. Ray keeps having visions and hearing voices. He is implored to go the distance, that other bit of instruction that the voice gives, until he finally has James Earl Jones, Ray Liotta, Burt Lancaster, Ann Seymour, Matt Damon, and Ben Affleck either playing on that field of dreams or cheering from the bleachers. And as the film closes, a line of cars for as far as the eye can see, as numerous as the stars, count them if you can, winds its way into the night, mysteriously drawn to this place where people ask, is this heaven? And Ray says, no, it's Iowa. I'm 36 years old. I love my family. I love baseball. I'm a farmer. And until I heard the voice, I never done a crazy thing in my whole life. Ray had a head start on Abraham because Abraham was twice that age when the voice found him. Abraham was 75 years old when he left Mesopotamia, packing up everything and heading off on this wild goose chase, all because of intuition, because of a calling, because somewhere there was a city with eternal foundations, a city designed and built by God. God would build it, and Abraham would pursue it, though few people could understand what he was doing, where he was going, or why. When he was of the age that he should have been playing golf and pickleball at the club and brooding over the stock market. He had gone crazy, setting out for destinations unknown even to himself, 1,000 miles from nowhere. Faith and foolishness. But if God's voice gets in your head and whispers constantly to your heart, it can become an irresistible force that cannot be ignored. It can only be answered. If you have a little faith, just a little, Jesus told His disciples, faith not much more than the period at the end of a sentence, all manner of things become possible. And certainly Abraham is one of the best examples of this. This past Wednesday evening, the Winter Bible Study Group spent an hour or so with Abraham as he meandered his way out of the Ur of the Chaldeans, which is contemporary Iraq, to Haran, modern-day Syria, and finally into Canaan, the promised land that would become Israel. He made a couple of detours into Egypt with less than stellar outcomes, and finally back to the Holy Land again. And the only thing more twisted and misshapen than Abraham's steps were sometimes his personal decisions. It's not that he was following a voice that no one else could hear. That was crazy, yes. But if he had just stuck with that voice, he would have saved himself so much pain and sorrow. He kept stumbling and falling all over himself. For example, he had a codependent relationship with his nephew Lot. The poor boy, his father had died when he was young. Somebody needs to look after him. Somebody needs to take care of him. And you know how it is. Once you start helping out somebody in your family who is in need, before you know it, you're bailing them out of trouble all the time. You begin enabling very bad behavior. So glad my son Bryce is here today. Lot was kin and all, but he was just consumed. Just consuming Abraham's time and energy and resources. And then there's poor Sarah, Abraham's wife. The writer of Genesis can only say one thing about her, and he says it over and over and over again ad nauseum. Sarah can't have children. That's how she is introduced to us. Hello, this is Abraham of Ur. Hello, Abraham. This is Lot, his nephew. Hello, Lot. This is his father. Nice to meet you. Here's his other brother. Nice to meet you. Here's some very important servants that run his company and business. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you. And here is Sarah, she of the fruitless womb. Oh, this is Sarah. Did I tell you that Sarah has infertility problems? Oh, that's Sarah over there. She can't have babies. Every page. And so, I have some compassion for her. When the years of hearing Abraham prattle on about this voice he has been hearing in his head, and how she's going to give birth to descendants as numerous as the stars, that she finally says, "Would you just shut up?" In so many words. And she says, "Look, I've got this Egyptian servant girl. Her name's Hagar, and she's young, and she's beautiful, and she's of child-raising age. Just take her into your harem as a second wife, and then this voice that's promising you things can get on with fulfilling whatever promise he has made to you through this woman and her son, because you know me, I can't have any kids." And Abraham says, in so many words, "You want me to have sex with this younger woman?" Yeah? Well, okay, if you insist. And this new wife indeed conceives and has a son, and the resulting jealous striving never gives Abraham a minute of rest for the remainder of his life. And the world has been subjected to a sibling rivalry of Ishmael, the ancestor of Muhammad and Islam, and Isaac, the Jewish son of promise, ever since. And it continues like this all his many years. Abraham believing, and then Abraham falling on his face. Abraham saying, "Yes, Lord, thy will be done." And then Abraham taking matters into his own hands. Abraham trying to explain to others the voice in his head, this call upon his heart, and then Abraham betraying that voice and that call. Don't come to the story of Abraham looking to read propaganda where Genesis is always making him look good. Sometimes Abraham looks awful, embarrassingly so, cringe-worthy. This is not a superhero wearing a cape and flexing his muscles. This is just a man. He's just a human being. This is just a guy. But it's a guy that just keeps getting up off the mat and going on, going the distance, to quote that voice from the Field of Dreams again. In recovery language, Abraham was the epitome of the 11th step in AA. He sought through prayer and meditation to improve his conscious contact with God, praying only for the knowledge of God's will and the power to carry that out. He recognized his shortcomings. He knew that his deepest wounds were the ones that were self-inflicted. But he tried best that he could, over and over and over again, to put those things behind him and to press on. He's a person who kept believing in the one who had called him, who kept relying on that power greater than himself, though he was capable of massive setbacks, capable of falling flat on his face. But that was the difference between foolishness and faith. He just kept going. I've been asked 1,000 times over the years, I guess, what is faith? I want to have faith. Here it is. Get your pencils out. Just keep going. That is faith. Keep moving. Steve Perry and Journey were right way back in 1981. Don't stop believing. Keep the transmission in the forward position. Grind away. It won't turn out the way that you think it will. You're going to encounter roadblocks and setbacks and steep hills and mudslides. You're going to make some wrong turns. You might even have to make a few U-turns in your life, taking some steps backwards in order to eventually go forward. You're going to really screw up some things. You're going to have to adjust your expectations of life, of God, of others, and yourself. You're going to have to practice forgiveness of life, of God, of others, and most importantly, yourself. There will be course correction after course correction due to your own density and stupidity. You're only human. And due to the circumstances that are far beyond your control. All you got to do, though, is keep moving. Keep going. That's what faith is. There's this ancient story from China, part history, part parable, where a new tribal king came to power, this ruthless man. And he immediately attacked his neighbors with his powerful army, and he laid siege to the city of Julu. And Julu's king called for reinforcements from his allies right away, because he knew if his city fell, the entire region around would collapse and fall as well. But those allies, they had a lot of dragging of the feet. Let's see what happens before we commit. We need more information. Let's get together for a strategy meeting. We're so outnumbered that maybe we should seek peace. And one of the military leaders, named Xiong Yu, had enough of this waiting. He said this: when you go to rescue someone, it has to be like water rushing out to quench a fire. You just go and do it. And he did. He marshaled his forces. He marched from what is today Beijing, crossed the Yellow River to liberate Julu. And the morning after he crossed the river, he issued to each soldier 3 days of food and supplies, 3 days' worth. And standing in front of the entire army, he burned the boats that they had used to cross the river, and with them every tent, sleeping mat, cooking utensil, and every pot and pan. There was now only one way out, and that was forward. And I am told the Chinese have a proverb taken from this battle: sink the boats and break the kettles. Sink the boats and break the kettles. You can accuse Abraham of a lot of things, accusations that will stick. He could be a coward. He was a chauvinist. He put others in danger to protect himself sometimes. He often lost his spine, even after being audaciously courageous. He bucked against God. He argued with God. He passively shrugged his shoulders a few times when he should have been arguing with God. He wandered around as lost as a ball in high weeds, but he never gave up. He never went back. He never quit, because the boats were at the bottom of the sea and the kettles had all been broken into pieces. Drive was the only gear in his transmission box. And that, more than anything else, endeared him to God. Without faith, it is impossible to please God, the writer of the book of Hebrews says. And God saw faith in this man and was pleased in spite of the many ways that Abraham could conspire against himself and his own self-interest. There's a book called the Shevat Yehuda, and it's a book of Jewish stories from early in the Spanish Inquisition. It was a time of terrible suffering for Jews in Spain and Portugal, the late 1400s, the early 1500s. They were all expelled from the Iberian Peninsula. So as Columbus was sailing the ocean blue, stumbling into a new world, Jews from the old world were sailing across the Mediterranean to escape persecution, to save their lives. The Shevat speaks of one small group on the run. They boarded a ship to escape. The plague was found on that ship. So the captain cast them all onto the desert shore of North Africa. There was nothing there. They began to die of hunger and thirst. Those strong enough began walking the desert, seeking food, water, an oasis, anything. One man had his wife and 2 sons with him, and after a couple of days in the desert, she died of exhaustion. The children became so weak, so depleted, that they each collapsed, and the man scooped his boys up into his arms, leaving his wife there in the sand, and carried them. He walked as far and for as long as he could until he collapsed. And when he came to himself hours later, both of his sons had died. He got to his feet and he cried out to God and said, "Lord of the universe, I know what you are doing. I know you are trying to make me abandon my faith in you, but know this for certain, with all of heaven as my witness, you will not succeed. I will remain. I will continue to believe, and nothing that has happened to me or will happen to me can succeed in taking away the faith I have in you." And the book says he buried his boys in the desert, and he prayed the Kaddish: "Glory be God's great name throughout the world which He has created. May there be peace from heaven and life for all of us, for all of Israel." And then he got up from his knees, and the man just kept walking. You know, faith and hope are siblings. They are very much alike. And in the past, I've spoken of hope as resilience. Hope as perseverance. It's not wishful thinking. It's not blind optimism. Hope is not keeping happy thoughts. It's this inner tenacity. It's determination. And faith is like that. Because if hope is the fuel within our hearts, then faith is the moving machinery. If hope is the comforting dream, faith is waking up to make that dream a reality. If hope is an attitude of resiliency, then faith is the action that follows that attitude. If hope is the vision to see how it could be, how it should be, how it will be, then faith is the risk that is played in that direction. If hope is doggedly believing in what you cannot yet see, then faith is progressing toward what is being designed and built by God's own hands. If hope is falling to your knees and saying your prayers, then faith is rising to your feet and walking, and walking, and walking, and walking, and walking. What did the voice say to Ray and to Abraham? Go the distance. It's one thing to start out on a crazy journey not knowing where you're heading. It's another to keep going. It's one thing to plow under a cornfield and build a baseball diamond. It's another thing to stick with it and to complete the task. It's one thing to say, I believe. And it is another thing altogether to see that belief through to the end. Faith isn't starting. Faith is finishing. And may we all be found faithful, that God would be pleased.